Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stench of Truth radio show here for the final segment. And I would like to remind everybody that my guest this evening is Neil Kramer, once again, writer, philosopher, and teacher. You can find him at neilkramer.com, neilkramer.com. And we have been talking about his latest book, The Unfoldment, and Path to Transformation, Enlightenment, and Spiritual Growth. And prior to the break, I had asked Neil to talk about synchronicity and how we can look at spiritual growth and getting in touch with our consciousness and that spiritual pathway as being a very profound thing. And I had used synchronicity as an example because it is one of the most powerful things that people can experience in their lives. And when you do experience these things, they can serve as a learning experience for people who are kind of timid about engaging in anything quote-unquote spiritual because they have that, that idea about what it entails. But instead, it can be very profound and it can have incredible meaning and resonance in your life. So, Neil, if you will.
Yeah, synchronicity is a very wonderful thing, and for those of people who are not perhaps quite familiar with that word, it just really means a meaningful experience, apparently, that is totally coincidental. So you walk down the street, you're thinking of your best friend Bill, and hey-ho, there he is, and you see him in a crowd of 1 million people, and there's Bill, and he walks right up to you. That's a synchronicity. Now, from a reductionist point of view, i.e. those who believe that the universe is just essentially a big piece of clockwork, synchronicities will come along now and again, and we call them coincidences, and there's no particular meaning to it. It's just like, well, statistically, you are going to bump into Bill now and again, and statistically, you are going to find somebody reading the same book as you on the train now and again. And of course, we kind of brought up to think that way. When you start to study metaphysics, spirituality, the esoteric, you start to come across the idea that everything is connected to everything else, and at a very fundamental level. And as I said earlier, the quantum physicists, of course, are reminding us of this again. There isn't really a clear division between one thing and another thing. That doesn't exist. So everything, when you look at it at a certain level, is absolutely fused together with everything else. And the only thing that creates distance really is the mind. There is no distance. There is no hot and cold. There is no colour. It doesn't work like that. So we have this kind of undulating fractal membrane which we describe in a certain way as soil and trees and buildings and glass and metal and ceramics and all these different things. But really, that's just a description. It doesn't really look like that when you actually look at it. And there isn't a separation between the building I'm sat in now and the tree which I'm looking at over the way. There's no distinct distance between us. So when you get over that, and some people need a bit of persuading with that, which is fair enough, so go and look at that to whatever level you wish. And there are some fast and dirty methods of doing that, but we won't describe them on the airwaves. When you come to that knowing that everything is connected, that rather gives a different set of parameters to what synchronicity is, what coincidence is. Because you think, well, if everything's connected to everything else, then potentially there is no random coincidental events at all. They all have meaning, because the sort of substrata, the stuff that connects everything, what we call space, isn't really space. It's this tremendous energetic potential, this kind of what people nowadays call the 0-point field, this magical ether which enfolds all of us, is always communicating all the other bits of intelligence from everywhere else. And in fact, that intelligence is embedded in this space, in this ether, in this oneness all the time. So really, synchronicity is an indication that you are becoming very aware of your place in the world to a profound level. And when you do that, a nice way to say it, which I'm rather fond of, is to say the universe can see you. And if you're of a religious persuasion, God can see you. It's a nice way of saying it. And what it means is that your consciousness has reached a level where it can receive the signals that were always there, but you didn't used to pick up on them. And now you are doing this. What seems to happen is that synchronicity, fortuitous, serendipitous events that have a happy connection to the way you're thinking at any moment in time increase. More and more magical synchronicities pop up all over the place because your consciousness, your radar on top of your head has grown in its sophistication, and it's picking up more and more and more. And the depth of signal and the fidelity of that signal, the strength of that resonance is also increasing. So you can interact with the world at a much greater level. So at a very practical level, what that means is that when synchronicity increases, it's an indication that your consciousness is deepening very nicely. And really, it's sort of as simple as that. And you can push it. You can push that synchronicity out, and you can turn your radar on, a little bit like if you walk into a restaurant with your radar on. You become super conscious of everything, and you see people, what this guy's wearing, where the bar is, where the restroom is. Oh, this is a table. Oh, there's a nice booth over there. That'd be a nice place to sit. What the smell is, what shoes somebody's got on. You can turn your sort of Sherlock Holmes radar on big style, or you can walk in chatting to your friend and just not even really be at all aware of where you are, or what colour the wallpaper is, or what the floor is. Is it floorboards? Is it carpet? Is it tiles? Don't know. What are people wearing? Don't know. What they're talking about? Don't know. Not interested. So we choose, and both of those things are good. We choose what we focus on. And when you focus on your inner growth, your capacity to pick up on the constantly communicating ether, if you will, to use that rather Victorian term, increases. So you see more, you develop more, and that's what psychic people are doing essentially. They're tuning in to the sort of ultranet, the organic ultranet of the universe to say, gosh, there's all this stuff going on all the time, and I've just realize that I can turn on this kind of Wi-Fi in my brain. It's actually your heart where that's located, but I can turn this aerial on in my system and pick up on it and see things and connect events together. And the reason synchronicity increases is because you're also broadcasting a signal. You're not just receiving anymore. You are now broadcasting, and you can only do that when your consciousness is at a certain level, which is why ordinarily coincidence is very infrequent, because usually we're caught up in the hubbub of everything, in the turmoil of daily life, and we don't think clearly. We're not really in a position to receive any signals. When you work on yourself, when you clarify what you're doing and who you are, what it's all about, you begin to purify your consciousness. It's rather just the same as getting an old clay pot and giving it a good clean out and cleaning that vessel out so it would be fit to drink water from. So you don't want to do it, it's got all dirt and crud and grime and dead crabs in it or whatever. You clear that thing out. You purify it in a very simple sense, not in a moral sense. In a very simple sense, you purify the vessel of your mind. So the stuff that comes through it, you can actually process properly. And that's when we start to broadcast our own signals, and the universe can hear us as well. And then we have this beautiful thing, which we call synchronicity now, which is where events in the world take on much more meaning, and the connection and the apparent randomness flip around. Randomness decreases and connection increases.
Yes. And the synchronicities that people come across, and as you say, in the working with yourself and your advancement in your spiritual quest, as it were, to use those terms, which, obviously our language lacks in some ways because everything comes with a certain amount of baggage. But the way I look at it, too, is because when you notice synchronicities and when you decide that you are going to look for them, then obviously, yes, it's just exactly like you said. It's like you're turning on a radio yourself, and you're putting that message out there that's saying, hey, I'm looking for some help here. I'm looking for some things to happen.
Exactly.
And they're going to come your way. You know what's an interesting thing for me to think about, Neil, is how many synchronicities your actions every day cause other people around the world.
You know, if you want to know the answer to that question, then there is a fabulous book, admittedly, that I have contributed to, called the Sync book, right? And it was put together by a super guy called Alan Green and 26 writers on synchronicity and synchromysticism, as we sometimes call it, got together and produced this book. And it's very, very fascinating. And as far as I know, it's the first book specifically to deal with this subject from a mystical, philosophical and spiritual point of view. And it's very, very fascinating book. And yes, I contributed an essay to it. But boy, oh boy, those other 25 things that I read from people, some of whom I knew nothing of, fascinating read. What a great book. Get that book, the Sync book.
That's also linked up on your website too, I believe.
Yes, it is. But yeah. It really is a truly very, very enlightening read and pioneering as far as I know. In that I've never seen such a collection anywhere else ever on this topic from the perspective that we're talking about. You know, people will talk about chance and randomness and all those things, but this particular treatment of it is unique.
Yes, and I've heard great things about the Sync book, and I've heard some talks with Alan Green.
Alan Green,
right?
yeah.
Alan Green.
Alan Abadessa Green, that's right.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. This is very fascinating, and of
it's
course,
it's nearly as good as the Unfoldment, you know.
Well, naturally, I would expect nothing else.
Yeah.
But so in the last few minutes here. Mm-hmm. Neil, perhaps I think it might be instructive for people who are listening who say, hey, that Neil Kramer, he sounds like he has, something, his message is important. And it's something that I really think is something that I want to try to pursue. Can you give us a couple of things that we can do, besides getting your book, which is probably a really good idea, so that you can, have a sort of really basic kind of framework and idea. And so definitely get the Unfoldment. But if you were to, just sit down with people who are just saying, you know what, that guy has a really great idea. Just what kind of steps can I take if I'm just starting out and I really want to try and get in touch with my inner self, my consciousness, and I want to try to take some steps on that spiritual path?
Well, the Unfoldment really is a simple choice, and it's a choice to take yourself seriously. It's a choice to say, my presence in the world is not accidental, it's not insignificant, and quite the reverse. It's very consequential, and I may indeed even have this tremendous power. And I think that's something that right from the get-go you need to be conscious of and think, well, that sounds pretty interesting. As soon as you start to make those decisions and those choices, you realize that your consciousness is very, very powerful. And it's not something necessarily that you generate from your brain. I don't feel that way at all. I think it's something that you pick up on. Like we said, it's like a signal. And you receive it, you can interpret it, and you can broadcast it. You can rebroadcast it, shall we say. And you understand that it becomes important now, I've used this word once or twice, how you deport yourself spiritually. And this doesn't mean any airy-fairy, woo-woo, New Age guff. This means being a warrior when the time is right, being an artist when the time is right, being compassionate, loving, insightful, creative, true. So all those nice things that we do quite well, actually, they become particularly important. And it means you have to know yourself intimately. There can be no unknown areas in the Unfoldment, no blocked emotions, no weak triggers. You have to go in deep to balance yourself in this way. And so, I mean, the book is the best way of distilling all these things and saying, look, if you really want a crash course in this stuff, this is what I would give to my dearest friend. And look, this is just my view. It might be like flawed, but it's the best I can do. Here is my distillation of it. And so that book essentially shares many of my perspectives on different ways of looking at ourselves in the world, about our emotions, our families, media, politics, mystery, anomaly, ultra-terrestrial, extraterrestrial, crop circles, the whole gambit, the whole thing. All those diverse things have a connection. All of those things represent our engagement with the world, and some of them are dead prosaic and normal about our lives and how we interact with each other. That's really important. If that's not right, you're not going to have any ultra-terrestrial contact. You have to raise your game to have these special, profound, deep experiences. That's kind of what they're for, to tempt you as a reward to say, look, if you sort yourself out, if you be true, if you change your attitude to be more empowered and full of integrity, which we all start from that position in a way, but we have to remember these things. If you can do that, then this world becomes much more fabulous in a very true sense of that word. And each chapter in the book is basically a contemplation on key areas of this process, things that I definitely feel are worthy of everybody's attention, and they're just very interesting, period. And so I always insist on bringing the big mysteries of the universe into the little mysteries of our own private lives, what we do, who we're with, how we are. And so often the practicalities in the book are expressed in looking at the connection between our own inner world and the outer world. So emotions play a very big part in that, and there's a whole section dedicated to that. Clearing yourself from blockages, from jealousy, anxiety, fear, distrust, nervousness, paranoia, all those things are dealt with specifically to say, look, these things are symptoms of something else. Let's go to the root of it. Let's go to the root of why those things come about. Let's really, really decide for ourselves that we're going to make ourselves something different. So you can't take this book into your hands and just rearrange the furniture a little bit. What it's really saying to you is, look, if you're ready to totally change the lot, to become something different, to become something really like a massive catalytic sort of shift from the pupae to the caterpillar to the butterfly, that's a normal journey. You're going to do it anyway, but some people want a bit of guidance with that and need a little bit of inspiration. And I, on my journeys, the only thing that's peculiar about me in this respect is that I've spent a lot of time on this, more time than most people will ever do, because I've made this personal commitment to myself to do it. And along the way, you do find things that are kind of universal. Most of them are old things. They're not mine at all. They're things I've dug up, as it were, and said, wow, look at this. This is pretty awesome. This can help us. This can help us be stronger and better and feel more comfortable about ourselves in the world. And if you go to the root of it, some Hindu guy said it 5,000 years ago, and some Atlantean entity said it 20,000 years ago, and you're like, oh, well, it's not really new at all. What's new about the book, though, of course, is that it's now. It's our language in this 21st century paradigm, with the politics, with the culture, with the phenomena that are cropping up all around the world, with the fascinating cultural shifts that we're experiencing at the moment. And that's what's unique about this. It's this frame in this moment with these people right now, right in your own home, right in your own heart, right in your own bed. This is it. And the book is absolutely bringing it right into your own life. So the practicalities of that, you have to determine for yourself. You have to express for yourself. I will suggest things in the book, but it's very clear that it's not just to talk about mystery and to talk about phenomenal, interesting things that might titillate us for the evening before we just forget them again. It's proposing to the reader, do you really want to go on an adventure? Because if you do, when you come back from it, you'll be different. And if you're okay with that, then let's go for it. If you're not, put it down. And that is the proposition that the book makes. So it's quite a profound one, and it's quite radical. And newcomers, I've written it specifically so anybody can pick it up. But advanced students, people who've been doing this for a while, who kind of get it, they will also find new things in it, because always the story is new. Every time the oak tree grows, we've seen it before, but it's always unique, it's always new, it's always pertinent to the moment it's in. And that, again, is reflected in this book. So it is empowering. It is an empowering book. I'll put my hand up and, proclaim that. I think it is empowering. Everyone who's read it, who's come back to me, has said, wow, I have found greater power after reading this and listening to some of these things. And if nothing else, I'll tell you what, I really mean it. It might not be perfect. There might be little cracks in it here and there, but I mean it. And I think people respond to that. If somebody really means it, you can tell, and that has a certain power in it.
That's absolutely true, and I get that feeling from you very much. And of course, when I'm here doing my radio show, I have people on that I want to talk to because I'm genuinely interested in what they have to say, because I believe that they are honest brokers of what they can bring to the game. And I think it's very important for people to have access to knowledge from people who have a diverse field of expertise, and people who have delved very deeply into the subjects in which they're interested, and bring us a perspective that is very unique to them, but also is potentially very empowering. And that is one of the reasons why I had you on the show today.
Well, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. It was fantastic. If you will.
Yeah, synchronicity is a very wonderful thing, and for those of people who are not perhaps quite familiar with that word, it just really means a meaningful experience, apparently, that is totally coincidental. So you walk down the street, you're thinking of your best friend Bill, and hey-ho, there he is, and you see him in a crowd of 1 million people, and there's Bill, and he walks right up to you. That's a synchronicity. Now, from a reductionist point of view, i.e. those who believe that the universe is just essentially a big piece of clockwork, synchronicities will come along now and again, and we call them coincidences, and
and getting in touch with our consciousness and that spiritual pathway as being a very profound thing. And I had used a synchronicity as an example because it is one of the most powerful things that people can experience in their lives. And when you do experience these things, they can serve as a learning experience for people who are kind of timid about engaging in anything quote unquote spiritual, because they have that, that idea about what it entails. But instead, it can be very profound, and it can have incredible meaning and resonance in your life. So,
particular meaning to it. It's just like, well, statistically, you are going to bump into Bill now and again, and statistically, you are going to find somebody reading the same book as you on the train now and again. And of course, we kind of brought up to think that way. When you start to study metaphysics, spirituality, the esoteric, you start to come across the idea that everything is connected to everything else, and at a very fundamental level. And as I said earlier, the quantum physicists, of course, are reminding us of this again. There isn't really a clear division between one thing and another thing. That doesn't exist. So everything, when you look at it at a certain level, is absolutely fused together with everything else. And the only thing that creates distance really is the mind. There is no distance. There is no hot and cold. There is no colour. It doesn't work like that. So we have this kind of undulating fractal membrane, which we describe in a certain way as soil and trees and buildings and glass and metal and ceramics.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stench of Truth radio show here for the final segment. And I would like to remind everybody that my guest this evening is Neil Kramer, once again, writer, philosopher, and teacher. You can find him at neilkramer.com, neilkramer.com. And we have been talking about his latest book, The Unfoldment, and Path to Transformation, Enlightenment, and Spiritual Growth. And prior to the break, I had asked Neil to talk about synchronicity and how we can look at spiritual growth